Hello and welcome to the Creators Guild podcast. I'm Chris Howell, and with me behind the camera,
Jared Buckwitty.
And we're here to talk about all things creative. And as you can see, we have a friend here with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself, dear friend?
I'm Malcolm Tanner. It's my pen name that I write under, and I'm from Kimberly City, Reed Spring area. That's where I live. We live down on the lake on Table Rock. My wife and I were both retired educators. Doesn't make us smart necessarily, but we're retired educators.
Hey, you made it to retirement, and you were able to do that. So
yeah,
you got something going for you.
Something I consider ourselves lucky. You know, we're blessed. You know, in a lot of ways. So.
Well, that's a pretty area down there. So that's a nice place to retire to.
Oh yeah, and I like to write there. You know, sometimes I go out on the deck and write.
Yeah,
it's because it's, such a beautiful view most of the time.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That would be a really nice.
Yeah.
You could get some really good writing, especially we got fall coming on.
Oh, yeah.
Fall over the lake and whatnot.
It's kind of hot this year, though, because of the weather.
Yeah.
It's been so dry. And so I think we're going to have not as pretty as the fall as we had last year.
Yeah.
But usually it's very beautiful there.
Yeah. Still, it'd be like I'm picturing, I have no idea what your house looks like or anything, but I'm picturing the nice fall sitting out on a deck, a warm cup of something, and I'm going to write a story.
It works really good. It works really good, Chris.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to have a conversation here in a little bit with Malcolm. First, as we're going to dive into a chapter of A Flight from Shadows. And if you remember where we left off last time, we finally had a little bit of a confrontation between Tawara and Corvin. So today, we're going to continue. Chapter 22, A New City, Cycle of Rio, year 12182. By the grace of the gods, we want for nothing. By the mercy of their gifts, our lives are sustained. From their hands come the servants whom we revere. We worship those hands, givers of the earth, from which all life springs. Saparan Book of Dedication, chapter 87, verse 5. Is dragging me to business negotiations on our first day in Glen Heights truly necessary, Premier? Tawara asked, as she watched the scenery from the carriage window. I am anxious to see the city. She found herself quite taken with the symmetrical beauty of Glen Heights. Square towers that reached towards the heavens with colorful banners in red and green whipping in the wind of the heights, squat wide buildings with tall, angled roofs, and building after building evenly spaced like toy blocks in a row were a fascinating sight. It was so different from the sinuous arches and curves indicative of the architecture in Tradoc. These are the obligations that will one day be yours to meet, Tawara, Corvin said in a flat, dismissive tone. While we are here, there will be various meetings, negotiations, and parties, all of which you will be expected to attend. Tawara looked away from him. She had resigned herself to the fact that Corvin was regent, and she must be able to get along with him. 5 days in a carriage together would not have been possible otherwise. At least, he was good at remaining civil. She focused her attention on milling throngs in the streets of the city. The variety of people was astonishing. From the dark amber skin of Peron to the pale ashen skin of the Eastern Confederation, the style of dress varied as much as the people. Everything from heavy, enveloping robes to clothing so sparse as to be made only of straps and barely covering the wearer in any measure. Tawara's only contact with the other races had been an audience before her father, or her visits with the Trekken. Beyond those few brief encounters, Athandra's lessons on the realm of Paramese constituted the sum of her knowledge of their neighboring realm to the west. She stared in awe, seeing what she had only read about coming to life before her eyes. No wonder they die so quickly. They run themselves until they are all used up, she casually commented, to no one in particular. I think it is more the other way around, Athandra replied. They live so short a time that they run around trying to selfishly involve themselves in as much as possible. Still, Tawara said sympathetically, how are they able to rush through life without any appreciation for the beauty around them? I think it is less the lack of appreciation and more an apathy due to abundance, Athandra replied. She leaned forward to point past Tawara out the window. They were just passing an open market area filled with brightly colored canvas awnings. The carriage had stopped momentarily, and Tawara could see the entire square from her vantage point. Look at the market. What do you notice that is so very different from Tradoc? Tawara looked closely. It looked no different. from that of the Tradoc Market Square. Only the people are different. Replace them with high elves, and this could be Tradoc, Dora said, as she looked at Athandra in puzzlement. Yes, the people are different, Athandra said patiently, but what about them is different? Look at what they are doing. Tawara looked more closely. The carriage had begun to turn, and she strained to see as much as possible while she had the chance. It came to her in a flash of clarity. None of them are buying anything, she said in astonishment. They are all bustling about, but they are only looking. There is no trading taking place. It is as though it is all for show. Very good, Athandra said, praise clear in her voice. I knew you would be able to see it. When I was in Glen Heights before, I learned quickly how the market here, indeed the entire city, is run. No one does anything for themselves if it is not entirely necessary. What do you mean? Tawara's interest was piqued. How do they get what they need? Why have markets if no one buys anything? How does their economy continue? It is a strange dichotomy. It is at the heart of what I asked about apathy. Did you notice how lavishly everyone seems to dress? Whether they are riding in a sedan chair or walking, everyone's dress is gaudy and designed to attract attention. But what does the way they dress have to do with not trading at a market? As I said, they do very little for themselves. Nearly everything is done for them. They rush about as though trying to accomplish as much as they can in their short lives, but very few, if any of them, actually do anything. When the people of Glen Heights go to market, they are literally there to put on a show. None of them are there to buy anything. They will look at the wares available, and discussions about this or that will ensue, but none of them walk away with anything in hand. They have no work to do. Nothing requires their time, nothing of importance to require their attention, so they spend their days discussing trivialities and putting on a show of what life used to be like when people actually had to shop at markets and negotiate for the price of a turnip. Tawara tried to wrap her mind around what it was Athandra was getting at. But that makes no sense. How do they eat? You are forgetting the underlying strength of the Paramese economy, the one thing upon which their economy and the national religion is built. Athandra paused, giving Tawara the opportunity to ponder. Well, she considered, chewing on her bottom lip, the foundational source of stability and strength for the Duradim realm of Parom lies in Alkari trade. The Alkari Trade Guild manages the training and sales of all Alkari. Upper echelons of the trade guilds also hold seats of power in the Paramese ruling councils. While Parom does not call itself a theocracy, Saparanism is the regional religion, which evolves around the Alkari trade and permeates every level of economic and governmental power. Athandra laughed at Tawara's response. I am always impressed with your ability to quote passages you have read, but what does it mean? How would that impact the market and everything we were just discussing? Tawara considered again. She looked at Athandra in confusion and shrugged. I do not know, she replied honestly. I cannot see the connection. I know the Alkari slave trade is the foundation of their economy, and the Alkari themselves are central to Saparanism, but I do not understand how that could lead to what you have described. We missed something in our lessons about Parom, Athandra said patiently. The Alkari are not central to their religion or a foundation of their economy. The Alkari are their religion and their economy. According to Saparanism, the Alkari are a direct gift from the gods to the people of Parom. They would be upset to hear you call the Alkari slaves. They have no souls, no will of their own. They are beings given by the gods to make the lives of the people of Parom as comfortable and easy as possible. The people do not buy anything in the markets because they do not need to. The Alkari literally do everything for them. The people do not appreciate beauty, not because there is no beauty to be found, but they live in such luxury that beauty escapes them. The poorest Paramese citizen has everything they will ever need provided for them. None of them are required to work. Their lives are spent pretending to be relevant while they accomplish nothing. Every garden that is manicured, every building erected, every crop sown or harvested, the Alkari do all of it. Athandra paused for a moment before continuing. Not all the people are resolved to this way of life. The Paramese amongst the Trekkan, for example, they in general leave and join the bands to find a life of purpose. Tawara nodded in thought as she looked out the window again. They had left the market and were making their way up an incline, the wagon wheels clattering on the cobbles of the street, which was less crowded here. She tried to see the faces of the people she passed. What would it be like to have no purpose, no meaning to anything you did, to have everything given to you and nothing required of you except to eat and drink until you eventually die. Her thoughts were interrupted by Corvin speaking from across the carriage. Their worship of the Alkari as gifts from their gods is childishness. It blasphemes natural law. Were it not for our own need to rely on Alkari for labor in the copper mines, I would encourage the council to break ties with the Parames altogether. His words dripped with disdain, and he shook his head in disapproval. The trade negotiations were not the only reason they had come to Glen Heights. Avalonia, like the other provinces in Cuvia, relied heavily on the use of Alkari slaves in their agricultural and mining production. Twara had learned this in her youth. She knew her father planned to negotiate the purchase of a few dozen Alkari to work alongside condemned prisoners in the rich copper mines of the Cetra Mountains in western Avalonia. Any use of Alkari other than for labor strained even Corvin's steely resolve, and Twara knew it. That would be something she would be sure to keep in mind for a later time. Lathandra continued when Corvin had finished. Did you happen to notice anything else, less obvious perhaps, something about communication between them? Twara racked her brain, going over what she had observed. I do not know. I know they were communicating, talking to one another, but I could not understand them. She sat for half a moment in silence before the obvious took hold of her brain. Oh, I could not understand their language. That makes little sense. I speak Bachan fluently. Yes, Lathandra continued, in several dialects rather well. The commoners, however, are not so privileged. They speak a lower, less complex version of Bachan, known in Paramese simply as common. It has no written form and varies greatly across the regions as well as evolving over time. That is fascinating, Twara replied. It is disgraceful and lackadaisical, Corvin cut in. It is nearly as bad as the way they have the Alkari to do their labors. Speaking of Alkari, as part of our welcome, the humans have a custom of putting on a grand show of their pet gladiators. This human spectacle of a grand gladiatorial display to welcome us is an annoyance, but we must tolerate it. Twara looked at Lathandra, who merely shrugged. Silence filled the carriage as Twara considered the nature of Paramese society. She had been around Alkari, but only distantly. High elves did not see them as a gift from the gods, but as an abomination to nature, creatures born of the unnatural union of high elves and drow. There was little written about the Alkari and their origins. The high elves preferred to forget that portion of history and the wars their creation had caused. Instead, they had come to a reluctant truce with their own past, accepting the Alkari as tools to be used, nothing more. After half an hour, which seemed far longer, the coach arrived at the grand gates of the palace. They were huge, gaudy things made of uninviting iron bars in a crisscross pattern. Hard lines and sharp angles made them look quite uninviting indeed. Twara once again could not help but compare them to the elegance of elven workmanship. The carriage slowed to a gentle stop. Who wishes entry into the gates of the bronze palace? A plump man in a centurion armor that glistened in the hot summer sun demanded. Presumably, the self-important man was the gatekeeper. Captain Etherin's voice announced them loudly from outside the coach. The Premier Corvin of House Umari and the Princess-elect Twara Umari and Company. The man stiffly put his fisted hand to his chest, a salute of honor for royalty, and gestured for the gates to be open. There was a series of mechanical clanks, and the giant gates slowly began to swing outward. The carriage rolled through its sinuous design, accentuating that it came from a far more elegant society. The head of every human they passed turned. From lowly servant to members of the court, all eyes were fixed on the majestic carriage and its procession as they passed. You would think they had never seen a carriage before, Twara mused, watching the onlookers as they passed. Not many, with the beautiful craftsmanship of elven master artisans, Lathandra replied. An elven carriage may take years to construct. A human carriage is built in a week or two. Another product of their short lives? Twara asked. Another sign of the greed and laziness that has consumed their society, replied Corvin. Human craftsmen once created works near to that of the elves, in their own limited style. The focus of their lives is now on convenience and immediate gratification. There was more than a note of disapproval in his comment. Lathandra expounded on what they were observing. It has been many centuries since humans worked as crafters in Perome. At one time, they cared for beauty and took pride in the things they produced. Their utter reliance on the Alkari for all production and the comforts of their lives has made them fat and lazy. It is this way with most things in Perome. Once humans had the most talented poets and musicians of all the realms, such beauty in word and song that it surpassed even the high elves. There had been a time when they created arboretums and gardens that soothed the mind and soul. Now the Alkari produce everything in their society for them. Everything is designed for utility. There is still beauty to be found, but most of what is produced is more gaudy than elegant. Cassandra glanced around as she spoke, regret filling her voice. The ruling class still appreciate true beauty and demand the utmost in quality and refinement, yet they too rely solely on the Alkari to provide such niceties for them. Tuara listened intently to her tutor as she spoke. She had noticed the corpulence of the general population. Compared to the slender build of the elves, even the slightest of humans seemed plump. What about the Brundians? Tuara asked, letting her mind drift to other humans inhabiting Duradim. They do not follow the Separan religion. Surely they produce their own finery. I have seen some of their creations, and their attention to detail is astounding. They must still have an appreciation for beauty. The Confederation has its own perception of beauty, Cassandra replied. Form following function. They are a society of tinkerers and inventors who place the highest emphasis on new innovation. Ask any Burundian in the street, and they will tell you the most beautiful thing you can imagine is a new way of doing something. They create trinkets and baubles, Corvin cut in. They go against natural order as much as the Separan zealots, only they do so in promoting their discoveries. Their creations are their gods. But Father enjoys the occasional bauble their emissaries bring, Tuara offered. Perhaps the Paramis will one day learn from the Brindians and return to making things on their own, without the aid of the Alkari. Corvin let out a wry laugh. Their trinkets are not welcome in Perone. It is blasphemy against the Separan goddess to bring any of their inventions into Paramis lands. If Burundia was not separated almost entirely from Perone by the Great Sea, Perone would likely have marched on Burundia and subjugated them long since. But I saw Burundians in the market. If they are not welcome, what are they doing in Glen Heights? All peoples are welcome in Perone, Thunder replied. The Separans are very open to others entering their lands. They will recruit any who will listen to join them, but they despise anything that contradicts their doctrine. According to the Separans, other gods are inferior. The goddess of the earth provides all things. Their beliefs were set forth by the goddess herself. Those who follow her will be blessed, as they say, by the earth from which all life springs. Utter nonsense, Corvin interjected. Natural order exists in all things. Just look at the high elves, the drow, and the wood elves. If there is a more clear image of order in nature, I have not seen it. Tuara looked at Cassandra, who gazed out the window as though the insult had gone unheard. The long caravan of wagons, guards, attendants, and carriages wound around the well-tended, if not so well as elven, gardens and fountains. A carriage, with a few lower members of House Umari, who had come along to bolster their position on the coattails of the premier, ended the procession, its occupants covered in the dust of long travel on the road. At long last, the carriage and its entourage made its way to the two towering wooden doors of the main palace, standing 30 feet in height and banded with thick iron. Finally, Corvin sighed, we can get out of this sweat-box. I do hope the opening pleasantries don't take long. I am ready for a good washing and cool refreshment. I am sure the vice-chairman has prepared accommodations, Premier, Athandra assured him. After all, comfort is one thing the Paramis have been able to master. A cool white wine after today's journey would be most refreshing. I do hope it is not the milky, weak swill they brought to us when they came to the estate for the trade conference last spring, Tuara retorted with a snarky tone. It was like milk, mixed with the most vile of wood elf wines. No offense, Athandra, but your people's works of the vineyard do leave something to be desired. None taken, my lady, Athandra responded with a chuckle. The look she gave Tuara, however, said something different. It was not the look of someone insulted, but rather that of a teacher disappointed in a student. What? Tuara asked. It is only the truth. Wood elf wines, are among the least palatable in the realms. They are watery, bitter, and have very little alcohol in them. What is the point of even bothering with them? The drow. There is a race that knows the value of a good wine. The vintages are superior even to that of the high elves. Corvin sighed, interjecting his thoughts. I do not know that I would use the word superior when comparing the vinification of the drow to that of the high elves. Some may very well call that blasphemy. However, I will concede that if there is anything good that comes from those filthy cave dwellers, it would be the quality of the wines they produce. He gave Tuara a sidelong glance. We won't mention where you may have had access to such a thing. He knew full well that Tuara had been sneaking into her father's personal wine cellar for well over a decade, and that the dark, rich drow vintages her father had secretly prized were her favorites. It was one of those little things that the Baron had looked the other way about, along with other exploits, such as sneaking off during the night to ride Devant, or wearing men's trousers while practicing the sword and the bow. Tuara grinned at Athandra, who rolled her eyes in response. The carriage door opened and Tuara waited for Corvin to exit before she stepped out onto the stone-paved courtyard of the Bronze Palace. She looked up at its towering domes, the bronzed rooftops glistening in the sun, giving source to the structure's name. A tall, thick-waisted man with amber skin approached the carriage. He was draped in flowing red and green robes adorned with gold scrollwork along the hem. He wore a tall, pointed green hat with red tassels. 2 rows of similarly dressed men and women flanked him on either side. He spoke in heavily accented Kuvish. "Welcome, esteemed Premier, to the Bronze Palace and house of the Vice Chairman Divine. Welcome, Princess-elect Tuara Umari. Welcome to your household and guests." Tuara was surprised. She had fully expected to use Pachin, as they were in Paran. She was slightly relieved. She knew Pachin well, but reproducing its lilting tones made her jaw ache. He pinched the fingertips of one hand together, twisting them on the palm of the other in an old gesture as he continued. "We thank the goddess of the earth for your safe arrival. The vice chairman bids you greetings and invites you to enter the palace in peace and refresh yourselves from your long journey to our lands." He bowed formally, nearly doubling over, the long tassels of his cap brushing the paving stones in front of him. It was an impressive feat, given his girth. The double row of men and women followed his lead, bowing in the same manner. Corvin replied just as formally, bowing his head in the direction of the rotund man. "We thank you for your welcome, Palace Marshal. We accept your invitation and will enter in peace." The Marshal straightened and turned slightly, indicating the party behind him. "The house stewards will show you to your rooms, where you may refresh yourselves from your journey. We hope you will find the accommodations to your satisfaction. Cool refreshments are waiting for in each of your antechambers. A reception has been prepared for your welcome this evening, where you will be introduced to the court and welcomed officially to the vice chairman. Please relax and be at your leisure until then." Tuara smiled at Athandra. Relaxing in a plush room with cool refreshment sounded more than adequate to her.
Good.
So there you go.
Yeah, I like it. I think I have a couple questions about it.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's just, I think we see already sometimes in our society some of the laziness and the inability to work,
Yeah.
That people take for granted what people did years ago,
Yeah.
Where they really had to struggle. We've all struggled there as much as we used to, as a people.
Well,
I've seen that comes out to me a little bit in the writing. Is that where you were going for?
yeah, I mean, it's really like, go back to, like, you had an owner's manual for your car. And in the owner's manual in your car, one of the set of instructions was to, adjust the lifters. take the valve covers off, and here's how you adjust the lifters and set the timing on your car. Now we get things, and the instructions are, these are Tide Pods, don't eat them.
It's more difficult to do too. People have lost the simplicity of changing your oil or changing your plugs. It's gone away.
Yeah, and granted, you could argue that there's different sets of skills especially with advancing technologies and stuff like that. But from at a rudimentary level, or not even rudimentary, just a basic societal level, there's so many things that people just don't know how to do.
Yeah,
just in general. There are people that know how to do a lot of things, but if you look broadly and speak broadly,
right. Yeah, another question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Is that going to be their downfall? The other people? If they keep coming back to the chapter, they were lazy, and they didn't really do anything. The other people did everything for them. Is that going to be a downfall for the people?
So, to an extent, the way it's going to be a downfall for them is when the big bad stuff starts to happen, they don't have any way of protecting themselves.
Okay.
Because the stuff, we're talking like
Without giving away too much.
Well, without giving away too much. Down the road, there's going to be some big things that happen. So we divided that society. We try to make it realistic. Like historically, there have been divides in societies.
Agreed.
Sometimes it's give the masses, give them bread and games, and they won't pay attention to their subjugation.
Sure.
But the flip side of that is, you give them luxury, and then they have the Alkari that provide everything for them, and they see it. They worship the Alkari. They worship their goddess through the Alkari. So, these tools that are provided to them for the gods, it would be blasphemous not to put them to use within their society. But this reliance on them and this tiered system under which they live, there's going to be some major things happen in the future that this totally lends itself to.
I think that
here comes the big bad and utter destruction.
I believe that description of how you wrote that chapter really tells a lot to the reader.
Yeah.
At that point, that just even think it. That's if you're really not really engaged in anything, truly something bad could happen to you.
Yeah.
So perfect. Good job.
Yeah. Well, we chatted a little bit before we started recording, and along those lines, that's really, we've tried to plot out all 14 books that are going to be in this series to the detail of there's a reason society's divided like that. There's a reason there's language barriers. There's a reason the Alkari serve the way that they serve. And all of those things fit within the society, but details like this, like we're throwing them in. One, we like world building. That's the kind of writing style that we like to read. So we also like to write it.
Yeah.
But also we're trying to put in everything that we've put in, every piece of dialogue, even if at the moment you're like, well, that wasn't the most exciting chapter ever. But these are key elements that are all going to be we're getting to know the characters, but also everything in this chapter will be relevant to, some of it might be book 10 before some of this comes out. And like, oh yeah, remember in book 1 when they were riding in the carriage, goes all the way back to that.
Right.
That was the foundation
of
this scene that's coming up, so.
I'm not a fantasy writer, but when I look at what you're doing, the world building is just the most necessary thing that you do.
Oh,
I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you don't have the depth of the world, then your plot lines fall apart because. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, there's some fantasy where they don't do a lot of world building, then you keep it on your world building, you keep it kind of surface level on purpose. But in my mind, I can't think of any good examples where it's either, keep it surface level and let people kind of imagine what the rest of the world is like, and only world build to the depth that carries the plot of the story.
Yeah.
Or you got to go deep and be like, here's cultures and customs and politics and structures and houses and all the different things so that the world makes sense. But if you go somewhere in between, like I can imagine you'd lose track of stuff. Yeah. We would. We've got so much things that we're like, well, wait a minute, what is this? Well, now we have to decide, what's this hierarchy of this whole other...
It's an all or nothing proposition.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. It's cool. It's very cool. I like your stuff.
So, that's the writing style we're doing. I'm excited about book 2 and what we're doing.
When do you expect to be out?
So we're hoping book 2 will be out by the end of December.
Good.
So fingers crossed.
Yeah.
We still gotta get it through that final edit process and review, and then finish those final edits. But our goal is.
Good luck to you. It sounds like a great project.
We'll see. The good thing is most of it's already written and we're just revising. Now, when we get past book 3 and half of book 4, that's when we'll really have to be like, gosh, dang it. We have so much more to actually right.
Yeah, but it's, I think you guys are well on your way. It looks like got a good foundation going.
Yeah.
Good for you.
All righty.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we shift a little bit? You said you were an educator 25 years?
34.
34 years. Yeah. Well, you were a teacher and then you shifted to administration, right?
Yes. I was a teacher and coach. I hate to say coach because people think you're not very smart when you're a coach. And I know a lot of smart coaches. But I was a teacher and a coach. And then I was a principal and athletic director of.
I heard a story about
a superintendent.
I have no idea if it's a true story or not, but a student asked one of the coaches, who's the smartest teacher in the school? And he was like, well, I am. And they were like, what? What about the science? What about calculus? Whatever. And he's like, as usual, he's like, well, I teach history and I teach 2 classes of history a week. And then the rest of the time, I coach kids and we play football and do games and stuff like that. And I get paid the same amount as all the other teachers that are grading papers and doing all these other things.
There's some truth to that.
So, arguably, I would say I'm probably the smartest one for making that decision.
There's truth to that. But my wife was also an administrator, but she started out as an elementary teacher and then worked her way up as a single mother. And until we got married 26 years ago and then raised her kids and went to school, and bless her heart, she accomplished a lot on her own, and I was so proud of her, and she became a principal. And then when she retired, maybe I think 4 years before I did.
Okay.
And so now we're living at the lake, living the life.
Now, were you guys in the same school district?
No, she was at Marionville when we met, and I was at Pierce City.
Okay.
Met at a football game. But it was a funny story. If you have time for me to tell it, it's a quick story.
This is your time. We're going to talk about you.
Her high school principal at her school was a friend of mine. We were friends, and he said, I got this girl I want you to meet. And I said, okay, I'm not really looking for a date right now. I was single at the time. And he goes, but all right, we'll set that up. And so he set her up right across from me.
Yeah.
At a table, and she didn't speak to me the whole time. And I thought this was a set-up date, like we were supposed to be talking to each other. And so we go out to the parking lot, and Jamie asked me, he goes, well, what do you think of her? And I said, not much. She doesn't talk. She doesn't converse. And I said, well, she's just shy. She's just shy. And I'm going, I said, I don't know about this. So he calls me a week later, and he says, well, you got to try one more time. Just ask her out one more time. And I'm going, no, I'm not going to do it. And finally I relented and said, okay, one more time. So we went to TGI Fridays. It was on a Sunday. And the Chiefs are on television. Yeah. We were watching the game and had our drinks and waiting for our food to come. They started naming players. He goes, well, that's, Trent Green, and that's this person, just an example, but she started numbers and names. She knows football. And I like football, so maybe this will work out, And after that day, 27 years later, here we sit, still a couple. So
that's great.
But it's a funny story because it was almost no, we're not doing this. But she's wonderful. She's good lady.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And that's aspirations of, I want to retire to someplace where I can just focus on writing.
Yep.
I'd like to do it in the next 5 years. Not.
You're so young, right? I passed that milestone quite a while ago. So.
Yeah. Someday. That's my goal is
it's all good.
Get to the point where we can just write.
You'll like it.
So you have, how many books have you written?
I've written 8. I only brought 6 of those.
Okay. And how many of them have you written post-retirement?
Post-retirement?
Yeah.
I didn't start writing till 2017.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I've written all 8 of those books in 7 years.
Gotcha. See, perfect. This is my argument.
But I will tell you something, Chris. Sometimes speed is not your friend.
Yeah.
As far as having an editor and somebody looking at things. And my first time I wrote the first book, and it's the second version.
Yeah.
This book is. People ask, I think I told you this. People ask you, what was your best book, or what was your favorite book? And I said, not my first one.
Yeah.
When I do the first one, I made so many mistakes and I made so many errors, and I felt really unknowledgeable.
Yeah.
That I wasn't very bright about this whole process. So I finally relented to pay for an editor, which was the best move I ever made. Once I did that, did the second version with Linda's editing, my editor now, and still is through all 8 books.
Yeah.
I made some strides. I'm not saying I'm a bestseller yet, but I'm still working, but she was a big part of the reason that I got efficient at the process.
Yeah. I think the big thing for us from a time perspective, I don't know if we've mentioned it on here or not, but like when the first time we said the end with book 1 is, we had, actually I was at Jared's house. His parents got sick. They had COVID. And so I called my wife and she was like, I was off that week anyway. She's like, just stay down there. Like when they're done and over with it and stuff, then come, it was it was early on, and we didn't know everything. So I'm like, okay, so I'll stay down here. So I was here for 5 days. In those 5 days, we wrote 75 pages, like not book pages, but 10-point font, single space document pages. And I'm like, Jared, we could do this every week. Like we could easily write 75 pages every single week and keep that flow going. Because, barring, okay, now it's edit time, whatever. But just from a flow perspective, we can literally write that way.
Right.
So like even with having to go back and edit, those 75 pages translate into like 125 book pages. Like we'd be writing, a couple of books. You'd write at least 1 book a month.
Right.
If not 1.5 books every single month.
Right. And if it weren't for editing part, and rewrite part, you could really speed it up, right? The process slows down at editing and rewrite.
Yeah, but even if, let's say you spent you wrote a book in January, and then you took February, March, and April to edit it. You're like, okay, well, we've gone through, we've edited it, we've revised it, we've gone through it so many times. Well, now it's the end of April, and that book, we're going to pin it, and we're going to set a release date for it for when it's actually going to come out. Well, now in May, you write another book.
Right.
And then you have June, July, August of edits. And then September, write another book. So I'm like, that's at least, you could easily do 3 books a year.
Right.
More than that, I think, even.
Well, I'm hoping these came out.
If it were like, if you treated it like this is my job.
Right. Right. And these came out, these two, The Dark Journal and The Last Inning, they came out last fall.
Yeah.
It's kind of project I was working on both of these at the same time. My cover artist lives in Arizona.
Okay.
And she does a terrific job. I really like what she does. She actually tries to brand my covers where they look the same.
I was going to say these look. Okay, so these are
from these others, like book 1, this one, and book 2 was a trilogy. You can see we were trying to brand these, in the same fashion, different colors, but a different with the same scheme.
Gotcha. Okay, so these are.
This is book 1, 2, and 3 of the Mike Parsons series, right? And those were my first 3 books.
Okay.
So I stopped the trilogy when an event happened. I won't say what happened. People want to read it. But now we're on to a different story, and we went to book 4, and this was called Mirror Image. And Mirror Image was just a whole different case for Mike Parsons and Andy Marks.
Okay.
They're the 2 detectives. They start a detective agency in this book. Andy Marks was a former cop, and Mike Parsons was a failed prosecuting attorney.
Okay.
And so they team up. Mike does the legal work and Andy does the cop work,
Gotcha.
you know. And so that's how this book came about. And now I'm on book 5 in that series, which is Truth is My Alibi. I'm chapter 28 on the writing of that one.
Okay.
And that one's about an arsonist.
So-
Same guys who are, you know, being the detectives, but a different story.
So all of your both so this is book 1 and 2. Is there a trilogy with this one?
No, this one is book 1 and 2 of a series I just started. It's the second series. This is my first series.
Yeah.
This will be my second series. I'm trying to do this book as the is in the title.
Yeah.
In every book, the last inning, the dark journal. This one is a mix of the detectives get involved. These 2 detectives on the front cover, Felicia Braxton and Jack Hayes, get involved in a case where an old nemesis comes back to haunt them a little bit, but they run across a problem with the baseball team.
Yeah.
With drugs and the drug cartel. The Dark Journal is a separate story, but the same detectives on another case. This has a serial killer
Okay.
in that case. So
So
I
do you
write a
know-
little bit dark. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not terrible dark, but it has some darkness to it, a little bit psychological.
So do you know how far this series is going to go yet?
I don't, but
Just kind of
I'm hoping farther because I really like the characters.
gotcha.
They're former partners on the police force that go to a private detective
Yeah.
work, and they're partners in that.
Okay.
But he got shot in the beginning of the first book, which is not telling anything terrible, but he gets shot, and it was by this guy who they run across again
Gotcha.
later on. So during the case,
So from a writing perspective, is there another series or another author that you would compare yourself to?
I could tell you who my favorite authors are, but it would be really weak of me to say I'm compared to them because they're so much better, you know, at this stage of my writing. But I really like James Patterson's books a lot because his chapters are short and my chapters are short. I really like John Sanford, who is another thriller genre author that I like his Lucas Davenport character. And then I like James Lee Burke, and he's a little bit older, right, than some of these, but he still has a new book coming out. He's saying it. He's getting up there.
Yeah.
But he's a New Orleans out, who is a former alcoholic, recovering alcoholic. And he writes that story very well and that character very well. So
Have from a dark, like I've read Kiss the Girls, that series,
Yes.
where it gets, some of that starts getting a little, I mean, you're talking about mass murder,
Right,
multiple serial killers,
yeah.
but they get, how does yours compare?
The Dark Journal was my darkest book. But it was, I tried to bring out a little bit about mental health.
Yeah.
Because I want people to be aware of it, because we live in a society today where there's a lot of violence.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things going on, and I hope we can get a handle on that sometime. But the mental health issues some people face, we're just seem not to be addressing that enough. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just my opinion. It's not a fact.
Yeah.
But I wish we could throw more at mental health, and I'd try to bring that up to the front
Okay.
in this series. But I did want to read my opener.
Yeah.
Just
That's
the prologue. You don't have any triggers, do you?
I've got a couple of firearms, but
Okay, I do too, but I just wanted to read the prologue here.
yeah.
This is the prologue or the beginning, chapter 1, journal entry.
And this is in
This
which
is in
one?
the Dark Journal.
Okay, the
This
Dark
is book
Journal.
2 of that series.
Okay.
I've driven by these places so many times, never wondering how many bodies have been hidden in these open meadows, dense forests, dirty swamps, even rickety old abandoned barns. I only know I have disposed of a few myself, and I can't stop. There are many reasons and excuses I can give myself for these dastardly deeds: my cruel upbringing, my need for attention, and most certainly my personality disorders were a few. But you see, none of that really matters any longer. the thirst to kill, ever since the eyes of the very first dead body stared blankly at me with a cold and lifeless expression as I dug its grave, has now overtaken me. It's grown faster than my mind can handle and now becomes untenable. The unbridled urge to kill is becoming my personal demon, resting confidently and defiantly within my soul. I laugh at the demon's constant company, talking with me nightly, and I cry at its vice-like grip it has on me, and even scream in my sleep, waking me from the bloody nightmares it so often gives to me. Oh, and yes, headaches. The pain and the aching never seem to go away. They are building in intensity. But I am smart, which has surely kept me from being caught. Unsolved mysteries, one after another, I leave behind me. No one looks for me. No one suspects me. Grieving families and police are befuddled and despairing over the missing victims and loved ones, while my demon friend and I wreak havoc in the southwest part of Missouri. The biggest problem for me is I can't stop. The old saying, I know where the bodies are buried, holds true not only for me, but for my demon. We are both, I'm sure, the only two who know.
So that's the prologue to that.
Right. And there are other journal writings by the serial killer in the book, and I won't say beyond that what happens, but there are other writings that build in intensity as the book goes along. Detectives are on the case, and on this hand we have missing persons. Mm-hmm. That they're trying to uncover, find out where they're at. But on this side, we also have a serial killer. Yeah. And they don't know that at the beginning as they're investigating the case. So they actually build that case builds as they go along.
So that was specifically a journal entry. Is the rest of the book, are your books are they third person? Are they first person?
Mostly third person. I would love to write a first person book. But it seems odd to me because what I rarely read a first person writing. So I did read a James Patterson recently that was in first person, where a vice president's ex-wife was murdered in the book. And it's first person and it's very well done. It's an Alex Cross book where his main character, Alex Cross, is in the book, but it's well done. And I'm just not versed in first person well enough to do it. I wish I'd have written a few like that, but I feel comfortable in the third person.
Yeah.
So
I think it's I hear people talking about like, well, what perspective is the right perspective to write in? And I've even seen like there'll be people will ask the question, put a poll out there. What do you prefer, first person or third person? Omniscient or just from a character perspective, all different ways. And for me personally, like I've read a lot of different books that are different versions of third person or first person, and I'm like, as long as it's well written, I just want a good story that's well written.
I think the biggest problem with third person, and it's always in our critique group, who are also members of the guild. I don't know. Yeah. You know the guild members very well?
Some of them.
Okay, Tim Strauss and Steve Bassett and Andy Tarbox, who's written the Pinnacle Club, one of his books. But we get together and do these, and Tim finds my head hopping where another character has a thought and they can't have a thought in this chapter because this chapter is so-and-so's chapter.
Yeah.
And so it's a good thing we have an editor and a critique group because they find those things that you want to tell that story so fast.
Yeah.
Sometimes that you skip to the other person's thought and they say, well, they can't have a thought.
Yeah.
In this chapter, it's somebody else's thing. So.
Yeah, we've had that discussion a lot. And I think earlier on in when we were first writing, we would get, we'd bring things in that shouldn't be there. But we've written so much now with these characters and this storyline that we don't do that. And we've edited out the stuff that was in there before, but we've come across that where we're like, well, wait a minute. we're writing this chapter from Tawara's perspective. And we said, like, Athandra felt angry at this route. And we're like, but Tawara doesn't know that Athandra's angry. We can't put in there that Athandra felt angry. We could put Athandra's facial expression made it appear as though she was angry.
That's correct.
But, you know,
and my second fault, if I want to call it a fault, is sometimes I get too passive instead of more active.
Yeah.
We tend to want to tell the story without the actions of getting up and moving somewhere or seeing somebody looking at them, you know, and describing those actions more than just he moved to the window. Well, he had to do more than that, or just make it more descriptive at times. And I think sometimes you hurry. Sometimes you go around telling the story, but you stop and put those details back in. Makes it a better scene.
Yeah. We put a lot of details in, so. So if someone were going to jump into your reading, to your world, where do you recommend they start?
I would start with the trilogy.
And that's the Redemption trilogy?
The Redemption trilogy. It's because it really describes Mark Parsons as the individual. Mark Parsons is an awkward soul. He finds himself in jams a lot of times because he's not real responsible. But his ex-wife commits suicide in the beginning of that book, and he's really having a tough time consoling her parents and trying to figure out this is mostly his fault. So he's a lot of self-blame in this character, but he grows through the books into where he's becoming more confident in himself. And in what's happening around him in his world. He's getting better, as we say. But he's pretty messed up at the beginning of this book. He's a character with a lot of flaws.
Okay. So the Redemption series, and is this where, well, I guess one of the things we like to do is talk about where people can find you. Find your reading, find your writing.
My website is malcolmtanner.com. And that's MALCOLMTANNER, which is my middle name, by the way. Malcolm is. So that's how I got that one. Tanner is an old family name from way back. So I put that together. But it's malcolmtanner.com. I'm on Facebook as Malcolm Tanner LLC and Malcolm Tanner both. And I have a followers page, MT Followers. I also send out a monthly email, sometimes two, if I have something special going on, which if you want me to publicize your podcast, I will gladly do it in my next email. But I need to know, how they get there as well. You can tell me that and I'll do it for you. But I have 16.
We don't like to tell people about ourselves at all.
I got 1,800 people on my email list.
Nice.
So I'd like to grow that to about 5,000 someday, but it's it's hard to do it organically.
You're still growing up. You'll get there.
I hope I never grow up, actually. But it's and I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram as well as Malcolm Tanner 8927 at Malcolm Tanner 8927. So I'm on Instagram as well and LinkedIn. So you can find my stuff in there.
Okay. So you said you've got on the Redemption series,
right?
You've got the trilogy, and then you've got book 4, which is kind of not a retelling, but a new spin on that trilogy. Okay. And then you've got book 5.
Book 5 is Truth is My Alibi. I haven't got a cover for that yet because I'm debating a couple covers that I want. And so when I send my stuff to JC, my cover artist, I want her to have a real good idea of what I want, not be all over the place. Yeah. So I'm debating a couple covers.
Gotcha.
How it looks. So I don't have a cover for that one yet. And I'm also doing No Hope for Justice, which is a book about a young man in Georgia who goes to prison. But there's I don't know what you want to call it, a network of individuals who are out to get this person to begin with.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of push and pull in the book. And I've only got like 6 chapters in on that one, but I'm kind of trying to balance these 2 works at the same time. And I have 2 books of short stories that are coming out hopefully before Christmas. One is The Aquabird and Other Dark Tales.
Okay.
Some of the stories in there I wrote for YouTube channel.
Are they all the same, like thriller type short stories?
These are a little darker. There had to be horror, or I couldn't write for that channel. They wouldn't take them unless they were horror stories.
Are they like thriller horror, monster horror?
They're both.
Santa Claus murdering reindeers.
The Aquabird is
coming out for Christmas.
Yeah, Aquabird is more in that mental health genre again, what I was talking about. But the Drake's Last Stand is more of a thriller genre.
Okay.
And then the trees, which is the trees are apparitions and ghosts, and people pop out. I mean, it's really total fantasy and ghost-like situations. But that's a wide range of them. But there's fairly dark tales. But they had to be on that channel. It was called Fear from the Heartland.
Okay, that's
Paul McSorley.
Yeah, McSorley.
Yeah, I wrote for Paul's. I have about 3 stories, but 4 stories in there. But I got going in other lanes and can't do everything.
Did you go to any of the horror genre group at all to get some?
I didn't. But
to them.
No, but Steve Bassett, who is Eli Pope, writes good horror stories.
Yeah,
he wrote several for probably 3 times as many as I did for the show, and he gave me some ideas too. Yeah, and he's good at horror.
Okay,
so
yeah, we need to get him on the show. Xavier Kane is a horror writer, and then we have
that's the guy I was talking about. That's been an airman. Yeah. X-Man, as I call him, is. I've got his 3 books at home. He signed them for me. But yeah, we shared a story, and we were trying to write a story together. It just didn't work out.
Yeah.
But he's good. He's got some good stuff.
Yeah, him, and then we had Art Breach, who's in the horror genre group. He was actually on one of our episodes. He's going to come back again. We talked to him last week, but wanting to come back and talk with us again. So
yeah, there's several talented people in the guild. You know them. I mean, several good writers and better than me have been doing it longer than I have.
Well, even like I sat down and had a conversation with Susan Keene. Yeah, and I was like, Susan, we should have a mic right here because this would be our podcast. Yeah, right here while we're talking. Like I'm missing this opportunity.
Yeah. John was very helpful to me in marketing. John Caulfield, he had a lot of good marketing ideas and some things I could work on. So he's very willing to help you. And I'm appreciative of John doing that.
So, any ideas on all of these books are currently available, right?
Yes, they're all on Amazon. And I wrote 2 off books. The one I co-wrote with Carrie was Incentives of Evil. And that's about a former Navy SEAL who set back in the 70s trying to smoke out some Nazi war criminals that came to the United States and worked. The CIA hired them actually and worked as counter spies to Russia. At the time. So we went back and did a lot of research in that area too, but that's what that's about. Yeah. And then I wrote one book called Drowning My Suspicions, which was just a one-off. It's not a series. It's just a book about some friends, and one of them has an untimely death. And a guy, one of the friends is a investigative reporter, and he goes into finding out the details of what actually happened in that story. So those are my 8, plus the ones that are going to come out. Yeah. So I hope to have 12 by next summer. Nice. So hopefully all things go well. And they don't always go well.
Now, from a reading perspective, so you're writing, you said your short stories, some of them get kind of into that horror genre a little bit. All of your written story, all of your books are currently available, right?
Yes, they're all on Amazon.
your books are all thriller books.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Have you looked at branching out into any other genres other than thriller?
Oh gosh,
I don't know if like Michael Crichton, Patterson,
yeah, there's so many.
like I don't know of them anybody spinning off and being like, you know what?
Right.
I've been writing these thriller books forever. I'm gonna go do a space opera.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've thought about it, but just so comfortable with this. Maybe I need to get out of my comfort zone and do something else. Oh, well, Steve, Eli Pope, Steve's going into a romance novel or two.
Yeah.
Which for me, that's scary for me.
Yeah.
But, I could try something like that. I mean, maybe Human Interest, maybe book club.
Well, like I looked at when I sat down with Susan Keene, and we were at an event, an author event, and I just sat down beside her and we just started talking. Like I said, it was just a really interesting discussion to have with her. And I've looked at doing like some cozy mystery type stuff. And Jared and I've tossed around some ideas of a cozy mystery story. And then I'm like, oh yeah, after talking with her, I'm like, I can totally do this.
Yeah.
Totally different than high fantasy with elves and dwarves and magic and
right, exactly. And I think that's a good idea. I just haven't gone there yet.
Yeah.
But maybe I can. That's a good suggestion.
I mean, you could like cozy mystery falls right into the realm of
it does
this, only it's potentially
and
more
I
comical.
Find in the cozy mystery, there's a little bit of comedy in there too, where you can throw a few comical lines in, and a lot of those cozy mysteries. And I think I could do that.
Yeah.
I'm not all serious. I'm kind of
there's
a fun guy.
There's a challenge for you. Can you take, your Mike Parsons? Mike Parsons has a cousin who isn't a detective, but he lives in a small town, and he owns a bike repair shop. And he uses his connections to Mike Parsons to solve crimes in his town.
Yeah.
That's a total cozy mystery.
I kind of like that.
There you go. Then you tie it into your other trilogy, and then you get to rely on this for your detective stuff.
Right.
But it's all, and he can get on the phone and be like, hey, Mike, I think somebody just got murdered.
Yeah.
And Mike can be like, Jim, this always happens. Keep your nose out of stuff.
Right.
You're going to get in trouble.
Yeah. That's a good
There you
thought.
go. There's a writing prompt for you. Go down that path. See
another year down the road. When I finish these off here, and I wanted to say, the truth is, my alibi is actually about an arsonist. That's not about a murderer and I had a friend that I went to college with. His son-in-law works on the fire department and on the Kansas side. And I won't say which one, but he's helping me, that with the specifics of fire investigation.
Yeah.
And how fires start and, how quickly they can put them out. He's given me all kinds of tips in that book. So it's really nice to have some people to rely on, for things like that. This kind of gets away from the, not necessarily the killing aspect, because some people die in it, but it's arson. It's kind of a different
Think of all the mice. If you light the building on fire, all those mice. Somebody's got to find out particularly.
Yeah, actually, two of the possible suspects are fire survivors that actually were foster siblings. And they grew up together as lone survivors of fires in their homes. So I'm not saying they did it or didn't do it. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, there's Malcolm Tanner. I'm going to pull this up again. So you can go check out Malcolm Tanner. Go to his website, find his books on Amazon or
on Amazon.
Other.
No, just Amazon.
Kindle. Any of them? I didn't ask any of them in audiobook.
I have three. The first three are in audio.
Okay.
Yes. So I forgot to mention that, but the first three in the trilogy, they're on audiobooks, Audible.
Okay. So
as well.
So go look up Malcolm Tanner. Check out his website. You can find on on our YouTube channel. You'll find links to his stuff in the description with this video. And then, yeah, go, like he said, start with redemption and go from there, and then make your way through his series. And go connect with him. Go connect with him on Facebook. Sign up for his newsletter. And
Well, Chris and Jared, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you guys having me over. And
Yeah.
It was a good discussion, and I'm going to buy that book. I want to read it now after I read a chapter.
yeah,
And I listened to the other chapter when Liz was on, so I'm looking forward to getting that. And so we can have a better conversation about it when I finish it.
yeah,
Good stuff. Good stuff.
yeah, yeah. We appreciate you being here, and yeah, we'll keep in touch as book 5 comes out and as your short stories come out in the fall, and
Okay.
I'll get dinner later this fall.
I hope for, hope
Hopefully.
for the middle of November, right
Yeah.
around Thanksgiving. What I'm hoping for. So
So Thanksgiving and horror go well together. Like the Nightmare Before Christmas, the Murder Before Christmas. Something. Okay.
give
Well,
these gifts.
We appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, and I sure enjoyed our conversation. It was really informative. Thanks for sharing your book as well.
Yeah, yeah, anytime. And listeners, we appreciate you being here with us. And till next time, go in good spirits. Thanks for listening to the Creators Guild podcast. Don't forget to get your copy of A Flight from Shadows, available on Amazon. While you're there, please rate it and give it a review. If you like the Creators Guild, please like and subscribe, and make sure to share it with your friends. Until next time, go in good spirits.